Hello, sports fans, and welcome back to Ball Games and Beyond. I am your host, Evan Groat, and Ball Games and Beyond is brought to you by Sportsnaut.com. I got a couple of things I need you to do here before we get to the topic of the show here today. I need you to go out there and follow and subscribe to Sportsnaut new NFL channel on YouTube. Please do that. We got a lot of great content coming for you, and we'll keep it coming fast and furious all throughout the season. And then the second thing I need you to do is please go out there and subscribe and follow to the podcast by searching Ball Games and Beyond anywhere you get your podcasts. Okay, now the topic for today's show is NFL head coaches. Yes, we're going to talk about head coaches, and I want to talk about head coaches that may be on the hot seat as the 2024 season approaches. We're also going to discuss a couple of the new coaching hires that happened across the league. We had 8 new hires this year across the NFL. So we'll discuss those as well. And we have a great guest here joining us today. We're going to be joined by Armando Salguero, who is a senior NFL writer for Outkick.com. He does a great job for Outkick. And we're going to ask him about some of the coaches that may be on the hot seat. We're going to get some of his thoughts on where exactly one of those 8 new head coaching hires, which one landed in the best situation to have immediate success right away. So when I started thinking about this topic, I made a list of coaches that I thought, entering the season, based on some of the rumblings we heard in the offseason, the way it ended for them last year, may be already under the microscope with their franchises. Here are a few names that I think really got to get things off to a good start and then maybe even need to take some deep playoff runs here. Some of the more obvious ones, you have Mike McCarthy, of course, in Dallas. We all know that Jerry Jones can be very impatient with head coaches. Mike McCarthy has not had a lot of success in the playoffs with the Cowboys. 1-4 in his first 4 years. They had a bad playoff loss last year to the Packers, and that sits sour, I'm sure, in Jerry Jones's mouth. Another one of the coaches on my list is Nick Sirianni. Yes, Nick Sirianni, who as a rookie head coach made it to the Super Bowl and nearly won it against the Chiefs, but last year did not go according to plan. He lost both of his coordinators last year, right? They went and took on head coaching jobs, and they started out real well, 10-1, but did not end the season on a very good note, losing 5 of their last 6 games, including a playoff loss. Fired the coordinators on both sides of the ball, and just kind of a fresh new start there with Vic Fangio leading his defense and Kellen Moore now calling the plays on offense. We'll see. We've heard a lot about the relationship between Sirianni and Jalen Hurts and how it wasn't great last year. We'll see if he can get that patched up this year. But I do think that if things do not go well in Philly, he could be someone looking for a new job here, maybe following the season next year. A couple other guys, obviously Robert Saleh. He is a coach that we know that what happened last year with Aaron Rodgers and the injury, but certainly has to get it done there with a lot of talent on that team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. How about Dennis Allen with the Saints entering his 3rd year? 16-18 overall record with the Saints. They went out and spent a lot of money on Derek Carr last offseason, all to finish 9-8 in what was really a weak division. And, he's still, as a head coach, he's still looking for his first ever playoff appearance. I think he's on the hot seat here entering year 3. What about Sean McDermott? This one's a little bit more outside the box. I know you look at all the success that he has had in the regular season, winning all the division titles and making all those playoff appearances. But again, a 5-6 record in the playoff. You've got Josh Allen as your quarterback. And another thing I'll note is a lot of those losses in the playoffs for Buffalo and McDermott came at home. Those are bad losses. And so I think this year Buffalo has to make a deep playoff run in order for McDermott to kind of hush some of the critics that he has. There's several other coaches that you could point to that I think have a lot of pressure on them this year. Brian Daboll being another one with the Giants. I think you look at Kyle Shanahan. He could be a coach. I know that sounds crazy because he made it to the Super Bowl last year, but they've got a roster that is built to win right now, and the time is ticking as you have Brock Purdy's looming contract coming. You know that he'll be up for one in just a few years. They can't pay all of these guys. You see what's going on right now with Brandon Ayuk and his holdout. So I think Shanahan is another guy that could be under a little bit of pressure here. And then on the flip side of that, we had 8 new coaching hires this year in the NFL. Several new coaching hires. I'll go through. I'll name them for you right now. You had You have Brian Callahan in Tennessee, Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers, Mike McDonald in Seattle, Dave Canales with Carolina, Raheem Morris with the Falcons, Antonio Pierce with the Raiders, Gerard Mayo with the Patriots, and Dan Quinn with the Commanders. So those are your new coaching hires, 8 of them this year. That's quite a bit. You have a couple guys making their as retreads, I guess you'd call them, Harbaugh and Quinn. I'm interested to know what you think. Who landed in the best position? I think Jim Harbaugh, when you look at a combination of coach and quarterback, Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh is a tough combo to beat. But I also think that there's a couple other coaches here that I think could hit the ground running and do some good things. Raheem Morris being one of them. Kirk Cousins, again, that's a pretty good combo. They've got a roster, I think, that is built to win right now. They just went out and made that trade for Matthew Judon. So that's part of the discussion. We're going to get to it with our guest here in just a second, Armando Salguero. When we get back from this break, I'm going to step aside. Don't go anywhere. There's a lot more to do here on this episode of Ball Games and Beyond, brought to you by Sportsnaut.com. And welcome back to Ball Games and Beyond. And this week we are talking NFL coaches that may already be on the hot seat as the 2024 season approaches. We're also going to talk about some of the new coaches around the league and get some of our Armando's thoughts on that. And as I just said, our guest here today is Armando Salguero from Outkick, senior NFL writer. Armando, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Evan. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing okay. Looking forward to the start of the football season here. I'm sure you are as well. And I hate to get this conversation started out on such a pessimistic note, but that is the nature of the conversation today. We're going to start out by going through a few names of coaches around the league that I believe could be on the hot seat already entering the season, and then we'll get some of your thoughts on some of those names. So we'll start with a real obvious one here. I'm going to go with Mike McCarthy in Dallas, and I know that you might look at his resume right now in his first 4 years with the Cowboys and say, this is a coach who's 45-25. That's pretty good. 3 consecutive 12-win seasons. But when you're coaching in Dallas and Jerry Jones is your owner, you need to have more success in your playoffs. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on Mike McCarthy and whether or not he is on the hot seat as he enters his 5th season here with the Cowboys.
Yeah, dude, I feel something like the Grim Reaper with this conversation. He's undefeated right now, but already we're talking about the firing of Mike McCarthy. So here's the situation with him in Dallas. He's on an expiring contract, right? And Jerry Jones has admitted that the reason that he is on an expiring contract, didn't get an extension, is because of that playoff loss to Green Bay last year. While that loss didn't get Mike McCarthy fired, it obviously put him on the hot seat. It's not about the regular season for Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys. Everyone expects that they're going to be a good team. If they're not a good team, he might as well just start packing, during the season. But everyone expects them to be a good regular season team. The issue has always been, of late, the playoffs. What do the Dallas Cowboys do in the playoffs? Jerry Jones, who happens to be the owner and the only opinion that counts, has said, hey, look, this is a great roster, which I happen to put together, and I expect a lot of things from this roster. They have to do damage. And if they don't do damage, Evan, there's a big looming shadow over the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy, and that shadow's name is Bill Belichick.
That's a great point. That's a very, that is a great point there that I hadn't even thought of yet. Now that you mentioned it, I've heard some possible connections there, and that is an excellent point. And we talked about the playoffs. 1-4 for McCarthy in the playoffs with Dallas. That is not going to get it done. And this season already off to a bit of a rocky start because no CeeDee Lamb in camp for the Cowboys. Let's move on to another guy I have on my list. I have him ranked pretty high, and that's Nick Sirianni with the Eagles. It was a great start for the Eagles last year, 10-1. Things kind of fell apart, though, down the stretch of the season, losing 5 of 6, and they had that bad loss in the playoffs. They lost both coordinators last year from that Super Bowl team that they had in 2022. He replaces those coordinators this year, so hoping to shake things up. But what are some of your thoughts on Nick Sirianni on the hot seat?
Yeah, so Nick had a team that wilted at the end. That's bad because
Yeah.
when you're supposed to be ramping up for another Super Bowl try and you're wilting, suddenly you are on a bit of a hot seat, if not under the microscope. Here's the other issues. Something was amiss about that whole entire club. Sirianni's relationship with Jalen Hurts was off. Let's put it that way. It wasn't there wasn't as much daylight, or there was too much daylight between them as what normally Super Bowl contending quarterback and coach should have. So Nick Sirianni had to go into the end of season meetings with owner Jeffrey Lurie and discuss what to do about that. He had to fire his offensive coordinator. He ended up firing two defensive coordinators last year, one in the middle of the season and one after the season. And now he's in a situation where everyone expects the Eagles to be good and a Super Bowl contender again. And if they're not, and if they have the same kind of issues that they had last year, it becomes, Nick, you have fired your coordinators. Your quarterback is not, or has not in the past, been in love with you. You're next, brother. And so that's why he is a little bit in the line of fire. He is a focus for what the Eagles can do, not only throughout the season, but especially late in the season.
Yeah, and if things don't get started off on the right foot, you better believe those fans in Philadelphia are going to let them hear it. The next coach that I want to ask you about is one that people may not be talking about as much, doesn't play in a big profile city like Dallas or Philadelphia, but I want to ask you about Dennis Allen in New Orleans. He's entering his third season as the Saints head coach, 16-18 through two seasons, still searching for his first playoff appearance as a head coach. Don't forget he had that a couple of years and as the Raiders head coach years ago, and that didn't work out very well for him as well. So this is his second stint as a head coach. I believe that he has to get it going here this year in order to maybe see a fourth season with the Saints. They play in that division that's not the most difficult division, but he has not been able to take that team over the top yet. What do you think about Dennis Allen?
Yeah, the problem for Dennis Allen is last year was his first year as an NFL head coach where he had a winning record, and that was 9-8. And he still didn't make the playoffs. The other problem is he's got a veteran ball club. That is not a young team in New Orleans. That is a team that is trying to keep its competitive window open. And if they don't produce this year, if they somehow disappoint, what's the point of continuing on with a veteran ball club? And if you're going to not continue on with a veteran ball club, and you're going to go through a rebuild, typically that includes a new direction with the head coach.
Yeah, and not to mention they went out last offseason and they signed Derek Carr to that massive contract. So you would think that the ownership is going to expect to see some results in the near future. And it could be more difficult for the Saints when you consider that now they have to deal with Kirk Cousins as one of the quarterbacks in their division. That division that looked really easy on paper last year doesn't quite look as easy this year. The next one that I want to ask you about, I went a little outside the box with this one. Again, not a coach that you're going to see on a lot of lists of coaches on the hot seat, but I'm going to go with Sean McDermott. Okay. And I know that may sound crazy with all the division titles that he's had and some of the playoff appearances that Buffalo has had since he's been there. But again, it's kind of like Mike McCarthy. You have a lot of success in the regular season, but it's about what you're doing in the playoffs. You have Josh Allen, who is one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the NFL, and McDermott has a 5-6 playoff record in 7 seasons in Buffalo. And trust me, I live here in Buffalo. I hear it from the fans. Nobody has forgotten that 13 seconds game against the Chiefs a few years ago in the playoffs. So I don't know. What do you think? Could McDermott be in trouble if he does not get Buffalo into a deep playoff run this year?
I have to tell you, that is kind of like a dark horse kind of name on this list. Um, Look, it's hard to get fired if you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, right? Because he's going to win you some games. The problem for the Buffalo Bills is this is a rebuilding year. They got rid of both their starting wide receivers. They've lost both their starting safeties, who were the team brain on defense for them. In, you know, it's understood that the Buffalo Bills this year are diminished. They are lessened. They are starting over because the salary cap forced them to do that. Now, if ownership understands that and, accepts that, then Sean McDermott's going to be fine regardless of what happens, barring a total collapse. But if ownership expects, hey, we're the darn Buffalo Bills, we've won 4 consecutive AFC East championships, and we well better win it again this year and compete in the playoffs, that's going to get the ice that is often accumulating in Buffalo could get very thin under Sean McDermott's shoes. I'm not thinking that it's going to, but there is a scenario where it could.
I like what you did there with the ice under the shoes in Buffalo. That was good. All right, let's shift the conversation now to something a little bit more optimistic. Let's talk about some of the new coaches in the league getting a new start with a new team. We had 8 coaching hires in this past coaching cycle. Jim Harbaugh in Los Angeles, Mike McDonald in Seattle, Dave Canales in Carolina, Brian Callahan in Tennessee, just to name a few. I'm not going to go through all of them. But when you look at these 8 new hires, is there one that in particular that you can pinpoint and you say, you know what, I think he landed in a great spot, has a good defense or good ownership, whatever it may be, and you say, you know what, I think this guy is going to be able to get things turned around pretty quickly?
Well, I mean, that is obviously Jim Harbaugh, right? When you go from winning a national championship to the Los Angeles Chargers and Justin Herbert, who, while he's kind of leveled off here in the last couple of years, he started his career like, balls on fire. It was like amazing the way it was record setting, really, the way he started his career. And the reason that he hasn't been able to continue that arc is in part because he's had a new offensive coordinator practically every year. He's had a new offensive system practically every year. And the last couple of years, I got to tell you, the coaching in Los Angeles was questionable. Let's put it that way, questionable. Mm-hmm. Jim Harbaugh, unless I misremember, he took a team to a Super Bowl. He knows how to win. He just won a national championship, and he's got an outstanding quarterback. That's a recipe for a quick turnaround. That's a recipe for competing. Now, obviously, they're in the same division as the Kansas City Chiefs. Bad idea to be in that division, Jim Harbaugh. But, there are ways to get around that. And I got to tell you, a couple of years ago, Justin Herbert was playing, an eye for an eye with Patrick Mahomes there for a while.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think he landed in a great spot there. I know they're kind of rebuilding some parts of that offense as far as the skill players around Herbert, but I think Harbaugh is the guy to get that done there. I'm going to have some fun with you on this last question here, and I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit. Excluding Andy Reid from this question, if you were an owner of a team and you were starting a new franchise, and you could pick any coach in the league right now, excluding Reid, who would you pick to lead your franchise going forward?
Wow. So that's a lot to pick from because John Harbaugh, I have the highest respect for John Harbaugh. I have the highest respect for Mike Tomlin. The guy has never had a losing season. Let's see.
They've got Shanahan with the 49ers has also had a lot of success recently.
I don't love the fact that he hasn't
Sean
won a Super
Payton
Bowl.
won a Super Bowl.
DeMeco Ryans is probably the best young head coach to come into the league. What he did with the Houston Texans last year in a total turnaround was amazing. So, yeah, you did put me on the spot, and I'm going to go with the political answer. I'm going to pick A, B, and C. Tomlin, Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, and DeMeco Ryans.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with any of those guys. They've had Tomlin, model of success and consistency. DeMeco Ryan seems to be a fresh new face who's, taken the league by storm. And there's a lot of great coaches in this league. You could go Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan. There's a lot of great coaches in this league, but I think you did a great job there answering that question for me. And Armando, we thank you so much for the time. You can go out there and follow Armando on X at Armando Salguero. Please go out there and do that. He does a great job covering the league for Outkick.com. Armando, thank you so much for the time today.